If there's one thing that made waves in the already chaotic landscape of movies, it was when aged and prolific directors spoke lowly of the current craze in comic book movies. Ever since Star Wars redefined how films are produced as big blockbusters, this level of discourse has always been present. That those who make or prefer films of more original and artistic qualities of the medium have always held at least an ounce of aggravation for the mass appeal of marquee-valued blockbusters made for the biggest dollar. Martin Scorsese was asked by Empire if he watched Marvel movies. His response? I don't see them. I've tried, but that's not cinema. Honestly, the closest I can think of them, as well made as they are, with actors doing the best they can under the circumstances, is theme parks. It isn't the cinema of human beings trying to convey emotional, psychological experiences to another human being. James Gunn, director of Guardians of the Galaxy, responded on Twitter, stating, "Martin Scorsese is one of my 5 favorite living filmmakers. I was outraged when people picketed The Last Temptation of Christ without having seen the film. I'm saddened that he's now judging my films in the same way. And I'm not saying religious zealotry is the same as not liking my movies or in the same category. What I'm saying is I'm not fond of people judging things without actually seeing them, whether it's a movie about Jesus or a genre." While Gunn had the Avengers director Joss Whedon try to comfort him, director Francis Ford Coppola backed up the comments by Scorsese. And this is where things get muddy. Coppola stated, "When Martin Scorsese says that the Marvel pictures are not cinema, he's right, because we expect to learn something from cinema. We expect to gain something, some enlightenment, some knowledge, some inspiration. I don't know that anyone gets anything out of seeing the same movie over and over again." Martin was kind when he said it's not cinema. He didn't say it's despicable, which I just say it is. Coppola was more cruel and direct, and thus a battle line was drawn. Who do you side with? Do you assert with the ranks of Scorsese and Coppola that superhero movies are damaging to cinema, or do you believe these aged directors are behind the times? Which side is right? Well, both and neither. But first, let's dismiss the petty discourse in this argument. In the wake of these interviews, there has been no shortage of quick defensive replies from the comic book community. This ranges from Scorsese not being a great director because of some film you didn't like on his filmography, to an article about how Scorsese and Coppola haven't collectively ever toppled the Marvel box office. These types of responses are childish and don't really dig into the issue, especially with one response that Scorsese only makes gangster movies. Scorsese's Hugo is easily one of the best family films I've seen this decade, and I will have none of that sass. Scorsese did open up a little bit more because the media just can't resist a hot take. Right now, the theaters seem to be mainly supporting the theme park, amusement park, comic book films. They're taking over the theaters. I think they can have those films, it's fine. It's just that shouldn't become what our young people believe is cinema. It just shouldn't. There's a cause for concern about this prevailing genre. In 2019, comic book films have made the most money, specifically Marvel movies. Avengers Endgame set a box office record of $2.7 billion worldwide, and both Captain Marvel and Spider-Man Far From Home have grossed $1 billion each worldwide. Even Joker, as of this video, is nearing closer to $1 billion. These movies are making absurd amounts of money, and that translates to more of them crowding movie theaters. People keep going to these movies in droves. If you've ever found yourself looking at a theater marquee and remarking it looks like there are no original movies, this is the reason why. Hollywood is not out of ideas. They are just playing things safe on sure bets. Making a movie is a gamble, especially one that's an epic that costs well over $100 million. And rather than take a chance on a number, Disney is placing all their chips on red. And so far, it's working. It's working so well, in fact, that Disney already has their next slate of Marvel movies lined up until 2022, releasing 2 to 3 films a year. And since these films are going to have budgets well over $100 million and have big marketing campaigns behind them, it means there's going to be an absurdly large number of people crafting these stories. And not all of those decisions will be artistic, as they'll keep in mind marketing, demographics, and MPAA rating requirements. Keep in mind, the average American only goes to the movie theater about 5 times a year, and studios, with such heavy investments, will do everything within their power to make sure their film is one, or maybe all of those 5. This is not to say that comic book movies cannot touch on deeper themes, but most of the time the more human and thematic elements are often overshadowed by the theatrics. Captain Marvel touched on female empowerment, but more in small nuggets of easy-to-read scenes on the topic. Thor Ragnarok and Black Panther focused on colonialism, but only to a degree where it would fit neatly into either a neon adventure or a palatable Afrofuturism. It's why there's a scene in Black Panther which is thematically a battle of opposing civil rights views, and yet most audiences miss this entirely because they're distracted by the lackluster computer graphics. Even Joker is guilty of this as well, despite how many are claiming it's a profound masterpiece that touches on the ills of society. The grander themes of class struggle and mental health are graced but not explored deeply that general audiences don't have to think about it too much. They'll be too busy paying attention to Joaquin Phoenix dancing downstairs in clown makeup. Joker presents just enough of the themes rarely seen in comic book movies so that fans can claim it to be revolutionary for saying something about society without having to talk about it past just being dark and scary. It's fast food sophistication, really. These films are merely peering on topics that are far better explored in less expensive and lesser seen films that it's troubling moviegoers are mostly only interested in comic book movies. But comic book movies have not crowded the cinema merely because the studios have willed them to do so. They are placed there by demand. For Marvel's cinematic universe to have lingered as a constant for 11 years, it needed devoted audiences to not only keep coming back, but invite new audiences in as well. It'd be too simple and also disingenuous to say that audiences keep going to these films because they're just a fad. Movie fads tend to come and go, and don't usually hang around for this long. Transformers was a blockbuster franchise, but the box office on those films soon waned. Many of these fads die out because they have nothing left to say, and audiences became tired of them. It'd be fair to say that Marvel's box office has continued to grow over these many years because they pursue different kinds of films, ambitious in scale, audience, and themes. James Gunn touched on this aspect in an Instagram post. Many of our grandfathers thought all gangster movies were the same, often calling them despicable. Some of our great-grandfathers thought the same of westerns, and believed the films of John Ford, Sam Peckinpah, and Sergio Leone were all exactly the same. I remember a great-uncle to whom I was raving about Star Wars. He responded by saying, "I saw that when it was called 2001, and boy, it was boring." Superheroes are simply today's gangsters, cowboys, outer space adventurers. Some superhero films are awful, some are beautiful. Like westerns and gangster movies, and before that, just movies. Not everyone will be able to appreciate them. Even some geniuses, and that's okay. So if you're wondering why comic book movies have stuck around for so long, are becoming more revered, and not going anywhere soon, I'd argue it's a shifting in the content that's keeping the money rolling in. They may not delve as deeper as other films, but they have made strides. The fact that we even have comic book movies that even approach subjects of colonialism, feminism, and class structure is certainly progress to broaden appeal. Before Wonder Woman and Captain Marvel came along, female-led superhero films were considered box office bombs. But now, Wonder Woman and Captain Marvel have made a lot of money of their respective comic book franchises, showing promise for future female superhero films. The comments against comic book movies from the likes of auteur directors is one part snobbery and one part concerns for the diversity of film in theaters, some more snobbish than others. All aged icons tend to have that moment of despising the new and popular. Revered author Maurice Sendak of Where the Wild Things Are, in his old age, once spoke of ebooks, saying, "I hate them. It's like make-believing there's another kind of sex. There isn't another kind of sex. There isn't another kind of book. A book is a book is a book." The problem is that since these takes are now considered hot in the social media climate of divisive defensiveness, they gain more attraction from contention. And in all honesty, I don't really care if directors like Martin Scorsese, or any other auteur for that matter, thinks comic book movies are dumb, or not even movies at all. And it's not because I think that their films are terrible, or that as directors they're somehow not in some position to offer an opinion on film. It's their opinion that, while coming from observing the cinematic landscape, also comes from personal preference that I, and many others, disagree with. And honestly, in terms of really awful takes from directors, Scorsese's words are some of the least concerning, that it's laughable how this take has blown up to such a degree. It shouldn't come as a shocker that directors who dabble in stories about human nature with limited visual effects have little interest in blockbusters bursting with visual effects, saturated marketing, and 9-figure budgets. But calling these comic book movies not movies or non-narratives is not helpful, and doesn't really address the issue surrounding genre diversity. And it's also not helpful to write off any director's criticisms based on worth of artistic or financial value. This is not healthy discourse. It's mostly name-calling and memes. We're not going to get anywhere by merely calling Scorsese an old fart or calling comic book movies non-movies. You don't have to choose a side. You can still enjoy Martin Scorsese's body of work while still recognizing that his view on comic book movies does not sync with your own tastes. You can still see the appeal of comic book movies as films while still recognizing the crowding of the trend. So if there's anything to take away from this video, let it be this. Just stop asking Scorsese what he thinks about comic book movies. Just stop.